morning. My name is Donnie Glover, publisher of BMoreNews.com, also the author of I Am Black Wall Street. We were fortunate to get the foreword by the one and only Billy Murphy, attorney, former judge. I got to tell you, first of all, to God be the glory, first and foremost. Thank you, Lord, for all of the wonderful things you have continued to do for us as a people, as a human race, as a world. On Monday, it was announced, it was reported of what happened to the Haitians at the border. And today, Thursday, 4 days later, it's just dawning on me how so many people, too many people, don't know about the significance of Haiti. And that's why you got to pick up this book. It's more than about Tulsa. I look at the history behind Tulsa, including Haiti. Tulsa was, in essence, a freedom colony. Well, not Tulsa, the Greenwood district, where Black Wall Street was, which was a portion of the broader Tulsa. There were other freedom colonies across America, across Central America, across South America. Wherever there was slavery, there was an equal, if not stronger, propensity for rebellion. Black people did not take slavery laying down. Good morning, Mr. Crawley. And so if you get this book, you will have a better understanding. Now, I don't go heavy into Haiti, but on page 37, Toussaint Louverture, Haiti, case in point, more than any other Black liberation victory on this side of the world, the Western Hemisphere, this historic slave revolt has major financial repercussions still today. The country is Haiti. The European colonized this time are the French under the guise of one Napoleon Bonaparte, the hometown favorite. This go around was a proud Black man named Francois Dominique Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint Louverture, highly respected military tactician and formidable opponent, led the Haitian Revolution, the most successful slave insurrection in the history of the modern world. And so when you see Haitians being beat at the border, being turned away, and you see the U.S., I saw one news report where they were justifying the whip, saying that the men on horseback were protecting the horses. What? Let me get to our guest for today. Michael Randolph, good morning. We have with us the one and only mayor of Greenbelt, Mayor Colin Byrd. Good morning, sir.
Good morning to you, good brother.
Thank you for coming out to Baltimore last night. Tell me, did you enjoy yourself?
I did indeed. It was a beautiful evening, and I really do appreciate you extending the invitation, and always a pleasure and an honor to be in the presence of the Most High, Mr. Glover.
Oh, you're very kind. Tell me something you learned last night.
Well, I learned some really interesting things about the other Black Wall Streets, right? We hear about Tulsa, but what you had to say about, I believe it was Durham, North Carolina, as well as Richmond, Virginia, that was very illuminating. I wasn't as familiar with their history. Also, the stories that you shared vis-a-vis Florida, and even, who was free Black slaves, right, in America, and how Baltimore was so central to, free the origins of free Blacks in America. That was illuminating. And also just to think about how, of course, while our ancestors did suffer the brutality of slavery, against the backdrop of that, there were individuals like John Brown and many others who resisted that and who did so violently, and as part of slave rebellions. And so, I felt like I learned a lot, in terms of history. Beyond that, I learned about some of the elements of the bustling business community that is in Baltimore, in spite of all of the bad that you hear on TV and on the news, in the paper about so-called Charm City. The reality is Charm City is alive and well, and there are people who are surviving and thriving in the city. And it was beautiful to see what's happening with those who take those risks to serve a need in the community in the form of small business. And so, just the ecosystem that's springing up and that you will recognize, and was all of that stuff was not only illuminating, but it was also frankly inspiring. I mean, I appreciate the hospitality.
Man, the pleasure's mine. I'm grateful that you made the trip. This guy here, Chap Lovelace, he's a chaplain with the Baltimore Police Department.
So I met Mr. Chaplain. Yes, sir.
So even though this is Black Wall Street, he is evidence. He is a reminder that we welcome anybody. There was also another white gentleman there, John Davis.
From the Salvation Army.
Yeah. In my experiences with them, they remind me of John Brown. I'm not saying that they're necessarily freedom fighters, but in their own way they are. I wouldn't be hanging with somebody, black or white, who isn't about serving people, all people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There, he put another, like I said, not all white people are your enemy, not all black people are allies.
Hey, not all skin folk is kinfolk. I mean, to his point, absolutely. I mean, throughout history, there are the cultural descendants, if you will, of John Brown. And so I'm grateful that folks like the chaplain, as well as the other gentleman that you referenced, whom I had an opportunity, both of whom I met at the end, and the other gentleman from the Salvation Army had some very inspirational knowledge to share with me about some other elected officials whose stories he was familiar with more intimately. And so I look forward to connecting with both of those brothers, because in some ways we are all part of a universal brotherhood if we can see ourselves as harmonious like that.
You're the youngest mayor in America.
Youngest black
mayor in America.
Yes, sir.
Does that come with some kind of pressure?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, not so much the in America part, because to be honest with you, I didn't realize I was the youngest black mayor in America until probably about a year and some change into my term. I became mayor in 2019, and it wasn't probably until late 2020 that I actually realized that I was the youngest black mayor in America. When I first was elected, I didn't even really realize that I was the youngest mayor in the history of the city, simply because I wasn't running on that basis, or that wasn't why. I mean, that wasn't my why. That wasn't my how. But it was the reality. And I was actually told by some people that I did fit that bill. I wasn't exactly surprised, because I'm pretty familiar with the history of my city, which was founded in 1937. But to formally hear it, it does come with some pressure and some sense of allure. I definitely think it got more attention than it otherwise would have had I been much older or of a different race or ethnicity, frankly. And so, I don't focus too much on that. I try to make sure that I continue to be humbled and grateful to be able to serve the people in this way. But the way that the young black thing comes into focus is that, I have experiences and I have social network that is perhaps a little different than folks who don't have that background. And I try to make sure that while I represent the entire city of Greenbelt, I try to make sure that I do not underrepresent those people who represent what I come from. And so that means black folks. That also means, in some ways, young people, right? And some combination thereof. So look, I represent everybody, but what we know throughout the history, because we haven't had really any young Black males ever in elective office in Greenbelt, whether it's city council or mayor. I try to make sure that I fill the void that I know is created by that type of lack of diversity.
There's incredible, phenomenal Black history in Prince George's County. Can you share a little bit with us of what you've learned over the years? I mean, we know Prince George's is the wealthiest Black jurisdiction in the country. You're right there. And let me just say, for those who may not know you, I'm not surprised that you are where you are, considering when we first met some years ago, and I'm alluding to your advocacy on the campus of the University of Maryland. I'm not surprised at all, pleasantly surprised, but I see even higher heights for you. But can you share with us a little bit about Black history in Prince George's County?
Yeah, I mean, far be it from me to say that I know everything about Black history in Prince George's County. And one thing that I try to do, and I think this is something that older constituents and older individuals in general appreciate about me, is unlike a lot of other people my age, I'm not just living in this moment for this moment. I'm living in this moment for the future, and also to try to build upon the legacy of venerable forefathers here in Prince George's County, here in the state of Maryland, and all across the United States of America. So just as much as I'm inspired by the forefathers here in Prince George's County, I'm inspired likewise by forefathers and foremothers, frankly, in the state of Maryland, like Harriet Tubman, like Frederick Douglass, like Congressman Parham Mitchell. And, there are a number of other individuals, but I try to keep my bar high for who I'm inspired by and who I'm less inspired by. Within Prince George's County. Oh, and I will say there are other people significantly more qualified to talk about the history of Prince George's County and even African Americans in the county. We happen to know one of those brothers, and that is the Honorable Dr. Wilbert Wilson. He's written extensively on this issue. For me, and I'll be candid, my understanding of Black history in Prince George's County, at least my coming into knowledge about it, actually is in knowing, my family personally knew Wayne Curry. Actually had a, uncle who worked for him, who went to law school with him. That's not to say that that's the most important thing in the world, but I will say that my proximity to Black power in the county is probably a little unique in that way. And, Wayne Curry was somebody who was not perfect, but who certainly helped to usher in an era of Black affluence in the county. And so now when you look throughout the county, and I think we talked about it briefly last night, right, at places like Woodmore, at places like Fort Washington, at places like Brandywine and Friendly, Maryland, and Mitchellville. There are other communities, Cheltenham. There are some real examples of the best in Black America when it comes to professionalism, when it comes to entrepreneurship, when it comes to government contracting, particularly in light of the fact that a lot of the good in the economy in Prince George's County is built upon the relationship, the proximity to Washington, D.C. And frankly, a lot of Prince George's County residents migrated from Washington, D.C., but still work in and around D.C., whether we're talking about Capitol Hill or whether we're talking about other federal agencies. And so, it's a beautiful history, but I want to be clear as we're talking about the history of Prince George's County and that affluence. It did come at an expense. And that expense is there is income inequality, significant income inequality within Prince George's County. There are the haves and the have-nots. For every Woodmore, there is a District Heights, there is a Seat Pleasant, there is a Capitol Heights. And by the way, I say this not to say anything disparaging about those communities. Those are beautiful communities. I love those individuals, and I've had opportunities to meet leaders in those cities, as well as, just everyday people trying to make it to the next day, make ends meet. But the reality is they do have a different quality of life, and they have a different experience of Prince George's County than other individuals. So, as we see that affluence, we do see pockets of poverty, and we do see an education system that does not sync up with the so-called Black Mecca or Black affluence that people look at Prince George's County as embodying. And so there's work to be done, and hopefully I can be a small part of helping to carry out that work in the years to come.
You mentioned Wayne Carey. Of course, Irvin Reed is a big fan of Wayne Carey. He always talks about his experiences with him, and as well as parent Jay Mitchell. Can you tell me anything about Mayor for Life, Washington, D.C.? I mean, that's the other half of the puzzle, right?
Yeah. He's also a big inspiration to me. It's unfortunate that some of our counterparts who don't look like us only remember him for his indiscretions vis-a-vis drugs or vis-a-vis other shortcomings. The reality is he ushered in some ways some things that Wayne Carey was not able to do, in terms of, I think he was able to create Black millionaires, but I also think that he was very proactive in making sure that working class and African Americans who are in poverty had greater access to economic opportunity, and not just access, but actual, tangible jobs, summer jobs. A lot of people's first job was with the DC government. And so he shifted the resources from, historically underinvesting in those communities and saying, we're going to do something. So again, not perfect. And I try to learn from the good and the bad of a lot of these folks. But I will say that Marion Barry is extraordinarily inspirational to somebody like myself. And I tip my hat to folks like that. And, I do lament the fact that some people only want to focus on things that were less honorable about him. And I think, even recognize, let me just say this.
He took a bullet. He took a bullet for Washington, D.C., right? A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that he was active in SNCC before coming to D.C. And then once he got to D.C., a lot of people don't know that he was a jobs man. He was a servant leader. So, yeah, he ran into that situation. But as someone who lived in that world, well, I can tell you, he wasn't trying to get with that crack. He was trying to get with that girl. But anyway, I cut you off. Come on.
Yeah, I was just going to say this, like, even as we acknowledge what took place there, and you talking about, I think another thing that needs to be reflected on critically, even as we analyze the shortcomings of an elected official or of a community leader. By the way, to whom much is given, much is expected. So when you have that power, we do want to hold folks to a certain standard. So I'm not here to excuse it, but let's also not excuse the misdeeds of the federal government throughout history to target certain people who do fight for our community. Marion Barry was just one example, but this type of targeting from federal law enforcement agencies came to the Black Panthers. And if you don't like the Black Panthers, it also came to the so-called peaceful hero, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So, whether it's almost like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. He was extraordinarily peaceful. His message was one that didn't resonate with some people. Obviously, Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam wanted to go in a slightly different direction. Black Panthers wanted to go in a different direction. But it seems like everybody was at some point targeted by COINTELPRO or some other surreptitious government initiative. And so, Marion Barry, again, let's also recognize that he was in some ways a victim of that targeting.
So what's on, what are your priorities as mayor?
So I'll tell you a couple of things. First of all, I'll tell you that right now we are looking at the issue of reparations, actually. our reparations for our African American residents and Native American residents of Greenbelt. And that's going to be a tough conversation, but we'll put that on the ballot and we'll give the people of Greenbelt an opportunity to weigh in on that. The reality is we know that there's a significant racial wealth gap that persists here in America in spite of communities like Prince George's County. And we want to address that. We want to close that. But we also want to deal with the America's legacy of racism and in particular slavery. And the lingering effects of Jim Crow, which, by the way, is not foreign to the city of Greenbelt. City of Greenbelt, beautiful place, founded upon a lot of really utopian ideals around recreation amenities, green space, walkability, bikeability. And, while the city's not perfect in those matters, it was planned in a very beautiful way. And it was planned specifically, and it was founded by the federal government under FDR's New Deal. And so, again, a lot of those ideas were really utopian, but at the same time, let's be honest, while Black workers were heavily involved in helping to build this city, Black residents from day one were excluded from residency in the city, right? And so the consequence of that has been scores of individuals, generations of individuals not having access to those wealth building opportunities that come with the federal government literally giving you housing, right? So we're part of that story. Slavery is a part of America's history. Jim Crow is a part of America's history. And frankly, Jim Crow is in some ways a part of Greenbelt's history. So look, let's address that history. Let's study that history. Let's reconcile with that history. And let's move forward in a way that really helps to build wealth for our African-American residents. So if you're listening and you live outside of Greenbelt and you're wondering when your 40 acres and a mule is coming, feel free to consider making Greenbelt your home. I think the best is yet to come.
One of our members of Black USA family posed a question. Her show was on last night. Sister Biz, what do you think of the Haitians being beaten by men on horseback with whips?
It's terrible. It's terrible. It's but I think we have to go beyond acknowledging that it was bad, right? It was bad, but let's also understand that there's an accountability that has to come at multiple levels, right? And from multiple angles, right? We need to be holding the Biden administration accountable. See, look, when this type of stuff would happen under the Trump administration, everybody was ready to take up arms. But we had to make sure that, Frederick Douglass once said, I would unite with anybody to do right and with nobody to do wrong. And we need to be more objective in our critiques and not just make them so tied to partisanship. A lot of times we're quick to criticize when a Republican misdeed takes place, which, by the way, there are many of those to criticize. But we need to also be critical when mistakes take place under administrations that are democratically led, especially given that now the White House.
We've never had a Black governor. We've never had a Black U.S. senator. This is 2021. Is someone suggesting that African Americans, although we had a Black president, we're not capable of running the state of Maryland? We're not capable of representing the state of Maryland in the U.S. Senate? Is that what is being told to me in the year 2021?
Right. But I also want to just note that we also need to be holding Congress accountable, the House, the Senate, right? We can't get anybody a pass. And we can't, to Ms. Orr's point, we cannot, or Ms. Nicole, whichever she prefers, we cannot give the vice president a pass. To be honest with you, it seems like even in Maryland is a great example. Every 4 years, it has become the routine for a white person to run as governor and put an LG who is African American on their ticket.
That's getting a little old. That's getting old.
Right. It's getting old. And you know what? It's good to have representation in the governor's mansion or in the lieutenant governor's office, right? But the reality is this. Beyond representation, we also need to be looking at substance. We cannot just have people. We are not window shopping, right? We are not window shopping for politicians. We don't want to just look and admire the handiwork of a face and of somebody's accomplishments. We want to say, hey, look, you're putting this person here, but what is going to be their power? What is going to be their authority? And are they even going to exercise influence, or are they just there to help you rack up votes in the Black community or in certain geographical parts of the state? That's what we need to be assessing in addition to whether there's a black face, frankly, as lieutenant governor or governor. Because as the chaplain said earlier, again, not all skin folks are kin folks. And so I'm looking not just at whether there's going to be a black governor, but whether there's going to be an administration that reflects black interests in any way, shape, or form.
When I look at Baltimore City and Prince George's County public schools, we're at the bottom. We're at a fight for the bottom. And so for me, especially with Democratic gubernatorials, if they want to be my governor, they had better mention a task force to address Baltimore and Prince George's County. We are 30% of the state. We need a task force to address those two public school jurisdictions in particular. That's my demand. As well as, I heard it mentioned last night, a 50% goal for MBE. Hell, we're not even getting 2%. I like the 50% goal, but I'm also about reality. But we do need to build the capacity of black businesses. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So first of all, let's talk about the education piece. So the state of Maryland over the past several years have actually put in place a commission, as you probably know, to deal with education funding issues, including some of the inequities that have faced school systems like that of Baltimore City, and that of Prince George's County. And that was the Kerwin Commission. And they came back with some really interesting recommendations to deal with those funding inequities, and also to deal with some other policy related issues that affect the school systems all across the state of Maryland. But to your point, I'm not sure that what they've done, even though it is going to result in billions of additional investment over the next 10 years, I'm not sure that what they've done is enough. And I'm not sure that the way that they did it was the most appropriate way. We have to ask ourselves the question, if it's a commission that's supposed to be about addressing inequities affecting these school systems, why is it that the commission was chaired by somebody from neither Baltimore City or Prince George's County, or with any real connection to either of those school systems? With all due respect, Mr. Kerwin, Dr. Kerwin, is not somebody who has a bad reputation, but I can tell you that when he was the chancellor of the University System of Maryland, the HBCU lawsuit was the biggest black eye in all of higher education in all of America. That lawsuit was the biggest HBCU lawsuit in all of American history. And he presided over that. He presided over significantly lower graduation rates at all of the HBCUs and significantly lower graduation rates for African Americans at the PWIs. And so I'm not inclined to think that that is exactly what we needed to get the education problems either at the K through 12 or higher education level in Maryland solved. Again, it did some good things. And to your point about MBEs, yeah, we gotta do more to build capacity, and we got to do more to support black businesses across the state. But it's not just once they become businesses. We need to create an entrepreneurial ecosystem where more people can make the transition from, traditional 9-to-5s to entrepreneurship, because a lot of what stops black entrepreneurship is lack of access to capital and the lack of flexibility that folks have to make that transition because of their current financial predicament. You have to have a certain amount of capital, or at least risk-taking willingness or wealth, to even be able to make that plunge and it be a safe plunge in the business. Some people can make it a lot easier, when they're sitting on wads of cash. That's why these conversations about reparations, in addition to the short-term conversations about supporting MBEs, are important.
I gotta ask you this very important question. DMX comes to mind as I pose it. Y'all gonna make me lose my mind up in here. Mental health, COVID, isolation, people going to hospital alone, people being in nursing homes alone. Any thoughts, comments on our mental health today?
So, mental health, really big issue, and it's always been a big issue. But as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has made more people hit that breaking point when it comes to their mental well-being. And so, that is an important investment that jurisdictions at every level of government need to be mindful of. Here in Greenbelt, we have CARES. We have a CARES department. And to be honest with you, we need to invest more in departments like that deal with family and social services, that deal with counseling, and so we have probably more robust resources than any other city, when it comes to that, for our residents on a kind of per capita basis than any other jurisdiction in Prince George's County. But we can do better, and we can do more, and we should do better, and we should do more. And I'll tell you, you asked me about my priorities. My priorities really are right now trying to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, trying to make sure that we keep people safe and healthy in this pandemic, but also deal with all of the economic sort of byproducts of the pandemic when it comes to people having housing insecurity, food insecurity, and those are really huge issues, and they're financial issues. So those are things that I think really have to be addressed.
What are you seeing on the streets? What are you seeing in the faces of your citizens?
Well, let me say one other thing about mental health that is really important. I'm also trying to read these comments, but one other thing that's also important when it comes to mental health that we've seen, particularly in connection with this pandemic, is more domestic violence. I believe that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it is. I think we have some activities prepared for that. And so,
because people are home, they in each other's face more interaction, more drinking in some cases, more drugging in some cases. People are trying to deal with this unprecedented, stressful, highly stressful situation. Food deserts. I know we have food deserts here in Baltimore, so there's malnourishment. People not getting the regular dose of fruits and vegetables, lacking exercise, isolated. Then it's the argument: get the shot, don't get the shot, wear the mask, don't wear the mask. Okay, domestic violence. That's a no-brainer, right? That's bound to go up during COVID.
I don't make any excuses for domestic abuse. Men laying hands on women is something that needs to be a thing of the past. And it really should have never, ever been normalized. And by the way, I understand that it's not just men laying hands on women. I know sometimes women will lay hands on a man. So again, it goes both ways, to varying extents, but I don't make any excuses for it. At the same time, we do need to recognize that there are some triggers. And financial difficulties are certainly a trigger for stress in intimate relationships, whether it's a marriage or whether it's just, boyfriend and girlfriend. I actually happen to know somebody who did not commit an act of domestic violence, but was being hostile in his language with his significant other in this pandemic. And a lot of it had to do with them arguing about money and how they were going to make ends meet, and, him meeting his responsibilities, her so-called meeting her responsibilities, and that type of conflict. And, again, I'm not for that type of activity in terms of, verbal hostility toward women or domestic violence. But I think we do need to address some of those root causes if we really want to address the issue. I also think that when we think about some of these episodes that happen, whether it's domestic violence or whether it's somebody having a psychotic break that scares their neighbors or their roommates or their loved ones or their family members, their friends that they live with, we need to be mindful of the need to make sure that first responders, we have folks that are trained in mental health to address that, whether that's actual psychologists or social workers. That's up for debate, but we need to make sure that the only option isn't somebody with a badge and a gun. Not saying that that's not part of the solution, because obviously sometimes you do need to bring the law into you need to weaponize or you need to utilize the law. But there are some other circumstances in which I think, therapeutic measures can address the problem.
big question is, who are you passing the ball to? Who are you mentoring? What do you see politically for African Americans who may be 10, 20 years younger than you?
Yeah, well, 10 years younger than me would be 8. 20 years would be a little young for me to look. If I was hanging around a lot of what's 20 years, it's that'd be 8 years old. If I was hanging around 8-year-olds, people would be asking me questions. What's going on? I don't have any kids myself, but I will tell you that every child of Greenbelt is a child whose future and whose present I care a great deal about. That's why I want to make sure that the school system addresses the school bus shortage issue, which is crazy, and is affecting families, is affecting their children. That's why I want to see some of the acrimony on the Prince George's County School Board be resolved, because I think that is not helping our kids. And that's why, to your point, I want to see those inequities in Baltimore City and Prince George's County Public Schools addressed. In terms of, who I'm mentoring, I'll tell you that there's a lot of great young brothers and sisters and others in our community that I try to make sure are tapped in with me. We have a youth advisory committee here in the city, and I try to get to know those gentlemen and those young women, some of whom are in college at this point, and I try to, plug them in the political scene, and also let them know that I'm there for them and I'm there for their issues here in the city, that they have an advocate. As those conversations come up about how they can kind of, take the reins at some point, whether it's in elective life or in other life, because that's the other thing. This isn't the only way to lead. And I don't want anybody to feel like if they're not mayor or they're not a city council member, that they don't have the capacity. I would actually dare to say that the best leaders in America are not necessarily elected officials. And so, I try to make sure that I embrace the wide range of opportunities that I can try to connect people with and inspire people to engage in. But certainly this is one of them. And so that's part of it. We have Greenbelt Middle. They have a program, Higher Achievement, and I try to make sure that I'm tapped in with those folks because middle school is actually one of the most pivotal parts in somebody's educational life. If your middle school doesn't go right, then that messes up your high school and so on and so on and so forth. Not saying you can't correct it after that point, but typically students' habits and attitude toward education is very ingrained by that point. And so it takes a lot more to kind of undo it past the middle school age.
Is there a youth advisory council there?
Yeah, so we have a youth advisory committee. I'm actually the city's liaison to that. So again, I interact with these youngsters pretty frequently with respect to those issues, and they actually, by the way, let me say this: in Greenbelt more so than in most cities all across America and in Maryland, we empower our young people in a very real way, and that is by giving 16-year-olds the right to vote. They can vote in our city elections. They can throw the bums out, or they can put people in. And so, that's a power that we've extended to them, and we hope that they use that power as well as the power that comes with that, which is to advocate and to actually be able to use leverage with that advocacy. Because if you don't have a vote, you don't have leverage.
Okay, now there's one other area I gotta ask you about. Have you, because I met you, you were
I was probably
you were right.
Yeah.
Are you grooming the next generation of writers?
I got to be honest with you. It's a great question, but I got to tell you, no, not necessarily, not at this point. And that's because I've actually retreated a little bit from writing in some ways. I mean, I still do some writing on different issues, but I don't think I'm taking pen to paper as much as I used to. And one of the reasons, and I'm happy to share
that was your running game as a young leader. That was your running game.
It was, but let me tell you this: once you get power, and I have power now as the mayor of Greenbelt, and I'm not omnipotent, but I have power. Once you get power, sometimes you got to stop the talk and you got to start the walk. And so for me, I focus a lot more on actions since I've actually gotten the power than I did before. Before, when you don't have power, your power is almost solely in your voice, unless you have money. And if you have money, then your voice is your money. But I only had the pen, and so I did a lot more of it. But I think, to your point, I should be thinking about how we groom the next generation. The other thing about writing is not a lot of people like to write. A lot of these young people, they don't necessarily like to write. Some of them are great people, but they're not really as into that side of it. But it's an important side. One other thing I'll say about writing is it's something that there's a lot of solitude in writing. And so if there was a youngster that's really interested in writing, they would have to really come across my radar unless they reached out. I will tell you one way that I am kind of indirectly grooming the next generation of writers is anytime a young person reaches out to me to write a story about Greenbelt or about something happening in the community, I'm very partial to them, and I really do want to give them the opportunity to build out their resume, build out their sort of portfolio, because I know that when they do those stories, that helps them, present their case to whatever person that they might ultimately want to be employed by in that field, that, hey, look, I've done stories on mayors, blah, 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 blah. So I think indirectly, although I'm not necessarily telling them, hey, write like this or write like that, I think indirectly I am able to, help some of these youngsters who I think probably most politicians would ignore, unless you're writing for a really big entity. A lot of politicians will ignore them, especially if they're saying, oh, I'm doing this for a project, a class project. A lot of politicians don't really care to spend time on that. But I try to extend those opportunities to interview me, not to put myself on a pedestal, but I know, that a lot of those requests come in.
What is the nearest Black media?
Well, Be More News is certainly great Black media in the state of Maryland. Also the Afro, and pretty much evident that. Oh, and that reminds me, I need to respond to somebody. Is the Black Explosion, which is the Black student newspaper at the University of Maryland, College Park. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I need to respond to the young lady that reached out to me from there.
Maybe some of your young people could send articles. I mean, I'll certainly run anything that's sent to me. Maybe a writing contest. Maybe the heroes and heroines of Greenbelt.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
We got to spawn these young writers. Look at what the pen did for you, man. And I mean, your ink pen put you on a statewide and national platform. What you did at the University of Maryland, man.
Can you hang on 1 second? Give me 30 seconds.
Sure. So if you're just joining us, we've been joined by the mayor of Greenbelt, Colin Byrd, very special young man. Yolanda Pola, you asked for his email address. We're going to get that for you. Phenomenal young man. Please tune in and stay connected with him. There we go.
Yeah, I just put my contact in the chat. I don't know if anybody else can even see that.
No, I'll get it from there.
Okay. All right. So basically, you mentioned a writing contest. It's actually a really interesting idea. And I'll be honest, part of this stuff comes up against, some of my older colleagues who are not as ecstatic about these type of endeavors that empower our young people, or that bring out the best in our young people. And I think that's what we need, stuff like that. And for me, it's not just about writing contests. I think that we need to be having, I mean, I grew up playing sports, so I love competition. Actually, if it's not competition, I don't think it's fun. And sometimes I get bored. But we need to be having competitions for people to showcase all kinds of skills, whether it's writing, music, sports. I feel like we don't have enough of those opportunities for people to compete in a relatively lighthearted way, but also showcase their skills, whatever that skill may be. When I was at Maryland, one of the things that was a catalyst for the precursors to my political career, although at that time I was not per se so interested in becoming an elected official myself, was I won a speech contest. that was hosted by the Alpha chapter on the campus. And as part of that, I won $1,000 scholarship. And so, that's part of my history. But that also helped me, imagine winning a speech contest and what type of thoughts that might trigger in somebody about, where their gifts lie and where they can employ those gifts. Obviously, when you think about public speaking, politics is usually not far from mine. And so I'm not saying that then and there I thought about that, but it kind of kept me moving in the direction of social advocacy. I'll tell you that much. And a civil rights advocacy in particular. The other thing is I, would often participate in what's called Juke Joint. And Juke Joint was held at our Nimbru Cultural Center, our Black Cultural Center on campus. And Juke Joint was usually a showcase. We would have poets, writers, so-called comedians, musicians. They would just showcase their skills, and it would be Black excellence on display. And these are great students by day, and by night they would go into these juke joints, and you would be amazed. These nerds, what they could do when they put their mind to some type of artistic or creative endeavor on top of their academic know-how. And so it was a beautiful thing, but we should be trying to embrace that type of thing. I know Baltimore has a lot of those cultural outlets, but and we have some in Greenbelt, but we need more. And frankly, we need more that embrace us, because right now, it kind of skews toward, let's put it like this, the original creative expressions of Greenbelt, which skewed a lot whiter. So we need to embrace the excellence in our Black youth as well.
We're very proud of you, sir. How can people support you? How can people help you? What do you need? What do you need from Black folks there and throughout, and supportive white folks, Asian folks, Latino folks? Not at all to put you in any pickle.
Well, one thing I will say is I'm running for re-election. I'll be on the ballot in November. And so I suggest people consider making a contribution.
Oops, there it is. Oops, there it is.
There we go. So I would suggest people think through that. It's their choice. But I gave you my contact information. If anybody wants to know how to connect to support, they can feel free to reach out. And also, it doesn't matter if
a promotion has been named and claimed. Do you see that?
I do. I thank you for those kind of words. I really do appreciate that encouragement. And I'm humbled and grateful to even hear that. I think it's a little early for me to be going down that road personally, but I definitely will keep it in mind. And I hope that if that is your hope, I'll tell you this: hope is great, and hope is usually tied to vision. But a wise man once told me that vision is great, but vision without money is hallucination. And, so when we talk about running for governor or running for anything of that magnitude, one of the biggest challenges, whether I like it or not, is money. And so, I would be grateful to talk with anybody that has ideas about how I could go about raising the type of crazy money that people typically have to raise to get to that level while keeping my integrity, right? That's the key. How do you raise that level of money and keep your integrity? But yeah, feel free to reach out. And it doesn't have to be about supporting me. I really want to connect with people, whether they support me or not. If you dislike me, you don't like some of my ideas, let me know. When I ran for office, my slogan, and it always will be this, was vote Byrd, your voice will be heard. Vote Byrd, your voice will be heard. And that is a style of governance that was fundamental to what I wanted. For all of these years, ever since you met me, Mr. Glover, was, people who have power listening to people without power. Again, people who have power listening to people without power. Too often, the people with power listen to other people with power, exclusively. I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to them at all, but to only listen to people with power seems like the opposite of how power should be used in a democracy. Is the opposite of how power should be used in a society that is trying to lift up all of its people. That speech that I won, that speech contest that I won, that's what I was talking about. I was talking about income inequality and how it rips apart communities. Power inequality and how it rips apart communities. Until the voiceless are empowered, we're going to continue to see poverty. Until the voiceless are empowered, we're going to continue to see kids in Prince George's County and Baltimore City undereducated and miseducated, as Carter G. Woodson once said. Until the voiceless are empowered, we're going to continue to see people who are homeless. Until the voiceless are empowered, we're going to continue to see Black businesses not getting contracts at the state, county, or city levels.
You just brought something else to mind. You brought to mind, I was at a particular HBCU talking to some graduating seniors. I got an even better idea. Well, maybe this is in sync with Yolanda Pulley's suggestion of Greenbelt Mayor's annual talent contest. I got something even sweet along those same lines. Very sweet. These graduating seniors at HBCU here in the state of Maryland had not read Malcolm X's autobiography. I was floored. How about a book report contest?
I love that idea. And you know what's funny? I actually thought about that idea, but I got scared because, there's so much dishonesty when it comes to writing nowadays that I almost wonder how original those book reports would actually be. If you just open it up as a content.
Get your teachers to be on the grading committee. Maybe you mentioned University of Maryland. One of the University of Maryland English professors was certainly Bowie State English professor. Bowie is the oldest HBCU in the state of Maryland, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely take a look at it, and I appreciate that. And like I said, these are things that I've been thinking about for a while. I mean, we need to, just like we need to invest in businesses, we also need to invest in people, because here's the thing, I'm all for minority business enterprise, but let's also be honest that not every Black person is going to succeed through entrepreneurship, right? And so we need to make sure that people, regardless of race or ethnicity, have access to opportunities to build a great future, regardless of whether that's going to take place within the context of them owning a business or not. And so that's why I think the talent more broadly, right, investing in people in and outside of the business world is so important, right? And I think even though capitalism is the way of American society, I think there are other avenues toward people having a comfortable life or the type of life that they want.
On that note, care to comment on your vision for transportation?
With transportation, well, several things. First of all, we need to be investing more in public transit. Second of all, I do not support the governor's highway widening proposals. I think that those are really bad for local communities like Prince George, many in Prince George's County and in Montgomery County. And so I stand with those folks that are environmentalists and other activists who don't want their communities to be ripped apart by this environmental boondoggle. But I will say that when it comes to transportation, we also need to think through how we address the historical legacy of racism in public transportation policy. Now, what do I mean by that? The cancellation of the red line, right? That's something that we know had a racial component to it, right? And that impacts Black economic well-being all throughout Baltimore, but really economic well-being for...
Couldn't O'Malley have made that shovel ready before he left office?
Absolutely. And that's why you didn't hear me cite a specific individual about that, right? For me, it's about the issue. I could care less what governor fails on transportation or not. For me, it's about making sure that we get the issue right. And so, and it's not just the governor, by the way. It's also, the Maryland General Assembly. They have a responsibility and an obligation to deal with these transportation issues. I was literally just doing a community walk through our main street in Greenbelt Road, Maryland 193. And we were literally talking with the Secretary of Transportation, his designee, about all of these different issues about bikeability of that street, the walkability of that street, the need to adjust different things that make the streetscape much more appealing to people, regardless of how they get around, whatever their mode of transportation might be, walking, biking, or driving. And so, those are big things. But I think, beyond that, we need to be thinking about how we get more people at least the option not to use their cars. I mean, I understand some people are going to continue to drive, and I'm not here to ban driving, but I will tell you that some people are driving because they don't have those public transit options. Those issues exist in Charles County. They exist in several different parts of the state, including in Baltimore, and we need to address them. I was looking, and this is the last thing I'll say on this. I was looking at the fact that Metro right now is reviewing several different proposals for expanding public transportation along its lines. And there's a blue line that could go to Greenbelt. So I'm all for that. But then there's also a transportation need for connecting people to National Harbor, which is a very bustling economic center here in Prince George County. But you know what? Right now, the only way to get to National Harbor, if you don't have a car, you know this. But if you have a car, you might not even notice this. The only way to get there is by car. You're not. There's no other, transit access, bus or train that really is going to help you get to National Harbor from most parts of the state, or most parts, for that matter, of the county. Those are the types of transportation access issues that I'm most concerned about. And also the building of the Purple Line, right? That has been massively mismanaged, and we need to make sure that there's more accountability and oversight when it comes to the administration of these P3s. Oh, I mean, look, the concept of a public-private partnership, it could be great. I'm not mad at people for pushing it. But here's the thing: if you're going to do that, make sure it works, and make sure it works on time and under budget, which is the exact opposite of what we've been saying. So now, as I'm talking about this, that lady talking about me running for governor is kind of getting me excited. But those are things that I'm thinking about. Whether I'm taking the leap for higher office or not.
One last question, and thank you for your time today. We were to hear from Tony Randall from Next Phaze, but we'll catch up with him at a later date. But what do you foresee in terms of industry, business? Like here in Baltimore, we'd love to see some Fortune 500 companies. What is your vision for your city, for your county, when it comes to industry and having our young people prepared for those industries?
Fortune 500 companies are great, but more so than recruiting businesses owned by people in other states or in other counties to my city, I'm focused on making sure that people within this city have access to capital and access to the resources that they need to build and sustain great businesses. Whether those are multi-billion-dollar businesses is, to me, really not as important as to whether people can enjoy their life. I mean, this community is not a community. Look, Wall Street is fine, and making millions and billions is fine. But for me, actually knowing my community, what I think most people, even those who are in business, want to do is enjoy this community. And part of having a good quality of life is to be able to sustain your life through, basic resources. So I want to create more hundreds of thousandaires than we have right now, because we have too many people with negative net worth, right? That's what I'm focused on. And I think we have a lot of room to go when it comes to helping businesses get to that level. And then, when it comes to recruiting businesses to Greenbelt, there are things we want to do. But for me, I'm actually focused on the people who are already here and making sure that they get jobs, making sure that they have thriving businesses. That's actually my focus right now. But in terms of where I think those focuses can be, I think a lot of it has to build upon the existing geographical proximity assets that we have, whether it's NASA, Beltsville Agricultural Research Center, the University of Maryland College Park, Prince George's County Community College, UMUC. Those are entities. And then when you talk about education, we need to lift up the graduation rates, and we need to make sure that we bridge the gaps that exist between the kids who live in this community and those institutions that are so close to our community, right? It should not be the case. Like I always tell people, University of Maryland College Park is right down the street from us. But for so many kids in our community, because of the issues in the public school system, Prince George County public school system, it's so far away from them in terms of access. It's so hard to get into that school, right?
Do they provide scholarships for like the top 10 percentile? We leaned on Johns Hopkins University years ago, and to my understanding, they now offer scholarships to the top 10 percentile here in Baltimore City. Sometimes it's just a need for advocacy.
So it's an incentive awards program, right? And that at University of Maryland College Park, and that actually isn't just for Prince George's County kids, it's also for Baltimore City kids, because of course University of Maryland College Park, even though it's in Prince George's County, is a state institution, and so its interests are statewide. And that helps to diversify the school, and it helps to get them more kids from Prince George's County. But let's be honest, it's not enough, because the reality of the situation is it's still pennies on the dollar. It's still, I always look at it like there are sprinkles of African Americans at the University of Maryland College Park, but there are whole scoops of African Americans who live in the county, right?
Yeah, stop playing like you don't.
What was that?
Yeah, my thoughts to him is stop playing like you don't see us. You see us, not you. I'm talking about University of Maryland. You see us, black. 30% of the state. Stop playing.
But here's the other thing, and I'll be honest with you. Even though look, I'm a Terp, and I'll certainly have positive things to say about them and my experience there. But I'll tell you, like, as much as I want to help folks, matriculate there if they want to, like I'm increasingly big on HBCUs. I mean, we've seen so much racism at some of these PWIs that I'll be honest with you, I would not be disinclined to recommend that somebody, regardless of, what they think of rankings, that they choose Bowie State. I think there's something to be said about prestige, but there's also something to be said about having an environment that embraces you, that loves you, and that will not lead. Mm-hmm.
I'm glad.
Absolutely. And that's just something that I can't tell you that people will necessarily get at one of these PWIs in the state of Maryland. I cannot tell you that that's what it's all about. I can tell you that the people that's pulling the strings there have a whole different set of interests. But at the same time, I'll tell you, even these HBCUs, sometimes the man behind the curtain doesn't look like you and me. That's just a fact. We need to be examining.
Yes, we do. We got clowns at some of these HBCUs. And let me just say, with all of the money that's now going to HBCUs, they got to up their customer service game. HBCUs always said, we need more money. Sound like Baltimore City, we need more money, we need more money. After you get that money, because I see the press releases coming across my desk every day, 10 million here, 5 million. Make sure you take care of the people you're supposed to serve HBCUs. Morgan, Eastern Shore, Coppin, Bowie, and I'm more familiar with Coppin and Morgan. Make sure you're taking care of your community HBCUs.
So let me say this about HBCUs in Maryland, because most of the HBCUs in Maryland, with the exception of Morgan, actually fall under what's called the university system in Maryland. And this is an issue that I've raised before several times to no avail. One of the problems with the HBCUs is the governance of the HBCUs. So we can talk about the presidents of the HBCUs and how they do or don't do certain things.
You saying they handcuffed?
So here's the thing: they are subject to the authority of the university system in Maryland. And I'll tell you this right now: this is a travesty. But the last I checked, there is not a single HBCU alum who sits on that board. So you have people that have no ties to HBCUs dictating what happens to HBCUs. Some of them are black, some of them are white, but they didn't go to these schools.
So they don't understand the true value. They have not walked. They have not even seen somebody walking in those shoes.
Hey, look, and they do have at least one or two that are alums of HBCUs, but not of the Maryland HBCUs. I mean, there's no reason that there's no Coppin alum on that board. There's no reason that there's no Morgan State alum or UMES alum or Bowie State alum. There's no reason for that.
And these are part of the demands we need to make of anybody wanting to be governor. I remember under Early, our former president of Coppin, Dr. Calvin Burnett, he became a significant part of Maryland Higher Education, Secretary of Education, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, we need more advocacy. We need those. You said something earlier. You said, to whom much is given, much is required. I pray that more of us who do make it into various positions, not just government, but across the board, business, college, whatever industry, that we don't forget to look out. The more we in America, the more we become individualistic. The more it's about me, myself, and I. I hope more of us remember that to whom much is given, much is required. That's what I really hope. Listen, if people want to donate to your campaign, and please call this lady, Miss. She's going to email you. I know she's going to call you, Yolanda Pulley. It seems like you might want to put her on your campaign team for. That was a joke. You missed it. How can people support you? If they want to send you,
hey, they can hit me up. They can hit me up. That's my contact information. You know, if folks want to support me. But again, for me, it's not just about support. Is if you just want to connect. You know, if you want to exchange ideas, or you know, there's some other assistance that you think I could provide or that you could provide. You know, let's build. You know, that's what I'm all about. You know, I don't know what's going to come out of every interaction, but I come up into every interaction with an open mind and a lot of optimism. You know, especially when I know that the person on the other end of that conversation, on the other end of that interaction, loves us as a people. You ain't got to love me, but if you love us, you can probably love me because I love us and I do for us.
You know, I never really thought about this. You're 28. I'm 56. I hope you meet somebody that you can invest into. You give me hope.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You give me hope. You give me a lot of hope for our world. You do.
You know what's interesting? Let me say one last thing on that point. And I talked about it, you know, some of the young people in the city that I try to, and here's the thing, you know, I grew up playing basketball. And so, you know, and not only playing basketball, but watching basketball. And, you know, we would have debates, you know, when I was in middle school, we would always have debates about Kobe and LeBron and, you know, rest in peace to Kobe, by the way, but who's better and who's that. So I always have been keen, you know, on assessing talent. Identifying and assessing talent, like who's going to be the next. I mean, I was talking about LeBron before he got to the NBA. So I was looking at, you know, and I was like, you know what? I believe the hype, but I also see what the hype is about, blah, 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 blah. So every time there's a new youngster on the scene, I'm always kind of trying to make a prediction about what they might do in the league. But it's the same in politics. A lot of times I see a young person and I see them moving, and then I'll see some potential. And then I say, you know what, we got to develop that. You know, we got to try to harness that, you know, and so I look forward to meeting more of them. You know, maybe there's people on this call who have kids or no kids that fall in that. And please feel free to connect them with me, because again, you know, if we see that talent, you know, we want to harness it, because here's the thing, you know, just like in basketball, for every Michael Jordan, there's also an Earl Manigault, right? You know, Earl Manigault, right? The GOAT
from the Rucker.
There you go. There's for every Michael Jordan, there's an Earl Manigault, right? For every LeBron James, there's a David Thompson, you know. And if people don't know, or if for every Stephen Curry, there's a Len Bias. What am I trying to say here? You know, talent exists, but if talent is wasted, you know what I'm saying? That is a tragedy. That's a tragedy. You know, the United Negro College Fund said, mine is a terrible thing to waste. Talent is a terrible thing to waste. Whether your talent is up here, whether your talent's in your muscles, whatever the talent is, it's a terrible thing to waste. And so what I try to do is identify and then say, you know what, how do we make something out of it? How do we use it? You know, how do we use it for you and use it for the world? And so, you know, I definitely, you know, want to be a part of helping to stimulate that process, you know, because for me, you know, if people didn't recognize that I had a little something in me, I'm not even saying I'm all that talented, but if people didn't recognize there was a little light in me, you know, I would have never let it shine. Did you hop off?
Is there a Mayor for a Day program?
There's not a Mayor for a Day program, but there is something close, and that is we have a If I Were Mayor contest. And so as part of that, you know, people can write, you know, they get to write an essay. Youngsters, they get to write an essay about it. You know, we look at the applications and, you know, we connect with the youngsters and we try to reward them, give them the win, but also we try to kind of say, hey, look, you know, stay on the right path, that type of thing. But to your point, maybe we should expand it even more and kind of say, hey, you know, how do we show folks around and that type of thing.
We're proud of you, Mr. Mayor. I'm proud to know you. You give me hope for tomorrow. May the good Lord continue to bless you and yours. And whatever we can do to support you, I promise you we will.
Likewise, I appreciate it, good sir. Have a good one, Mr. Glover. Thanks for the invitation.
Everyone else will be back this evening at 7 p.m. for the Black Business Roundtable live from Oakland, California. Do pick up a copy of I Am Black Wall Street. We do touch on Haiti as well as the other freedom colonies across the Western Hemisphere. Please get involved in your local community organization, whatever that should be. And if you want to come on the show, just give me a call, 443-858-2684, 443-858-2684. Special thank you to Monique Smith and also Fatima West and all of the people that helped support our event last night. It was really, really great. Check us online for more photos, videos, and the like. My name's Donnie Glover. Up today, down tomorrow, do your day and everything will follow. Nothing to it but to do it. I got to do it regardless of how I feel. I am somebody. I am my brother's keeper. Good morning, world.